Are you having trouble finding minifigure faces or torsos in BrickLink Studio? Or maybe it's been hard to see which piece is which. You know, let's look at a few options you have in the building palette to fix these problems and more. So now that we know how to change the view of our model, how to find and add parts, how to change the color so it looks the way we want, let's dive a little bit deeper into how the palette works and a few options that'll help you be even faster with those options. The first thing you'll notice is that the main palette is the default, but there are a lot of other palettes available. For example, you might want to just see new parts that are um, more recent than others, like this really cool rock. For the most part, the main palette is going to be the one that we use when we're building. Next to the search bar, we also have a few options in the palette. So this grid will let us change how big the pieces in the palette appear so that we can see more, or we can see more clearly what the parts are. Depending on the size of your screen, that'll change what feels most comfortable to you and what's most effective for you. And some people like to see as many as possible to avoid scrolling. Others like to see things nice and large so that they don't accidentally grab the wrong part. Or people are often sometimes just in the middle of the happy medium of those. And depending on what size you want, you might also want more or less space devoted to the palette. Well, if you hover your mouse between the two sides, you can click and drag to expand or restrict the size of that palette. I find myself in a happy place with about 3 per line, maybe 4. It just depends on how I'm feeling. But a lot of that might be moot if you're not afraid to use your keyboard. Let's just say we're looking for some wedge plates. If you hit the Tab key, your model will vanish. Don't panic. Instead, your palette expands to fill as much space as possible so that I can see as many pieces as possible without having to scroll. And so I'll often build using the Tab key as a shortcut to show me more parts if I get a lot of results from my search, or if I'm just scrolling through the list and want to find, I want to see all the tiles available at once. Once I find the wedge I want, in this case, we'll grab this right wedge here and start to drag it out. The palette goes back to normal, my model comes back to normal, and I can keep building as I like. Next to the grid, we have a little stud, and if we select it, it will turn on decorated parts. You know it's selected when it's blue and has those decorated lines on it. And this is most easy to see if we come to something like tiles, where as I start scrolling, I can see we have tons and tons of decorated 1x1 tiles. So many. Same with 1x2 tiles. There are just a bunch of those different tiles. The descriptions of these pieces will also still show up in your search. If I search for envelope, you can see that I will pull up pieces that have envelope decorations on them. But of course, if I turn that off, those pieces are hidden. Now, I find it's really helpful when I'm building to have them off because I'll often search for things like a 1x2 tile. And I don't want hundreds of results populating with every possible 1x2 decorated variant. Usually I'll only turn it on when I'm looking for something specific. So if, for example, I know I really want a keyboard because I'm building a little mini office, great, I'll pull that up and that will show me some of those things, or maybe a piano keys is what I meant. Okay, there's a few of those decorated pieces. But normally I have those off. And then finally, we have this color selector in the palette itself. Now, if you're using one of the palettes that has predetermined colors, you won't see this option. But here, I can turn on, click on that button, it opens up a color selector, but instead of affecting parts, this affects my entire palette. So If, for example, it's hard to see these details in the white and I want to pick a different color just to show up by default, I could do that. Let's say I wanted some sort of, well, we'll go with dark yellow. And now you can see that my palette has that as the default color for me to see, but also as I start building, that'll be the default color of the pieces I pull out of the palette. If you're someone who builds with a lot of one color, that can be really helpful. For example, if I know I build with a lot of light bluish gray for my castles and buildings, that can be really handy to have that be my default color so I spend less time changing colors. I also have the option to hide unavailable parts in the selected color. This is something that can get people in a little bit of trouble, so use caution if you turn it on. But when I do turn it on, what it does is it hides any of the parts that are not available for me in this color. And I'm going to pick a color that's a little bit more obscure, just so that it's easier to see how drastic that can be. So in this bright light blue color, I only have 8 different bricks I can choose from. There's no 2x6 brick. I don't have near as many modified pieces. There's no, for example, masonry profile brick here in that color, especially when we come to things like modified tiles. I don't have tons of options there. And so often I hear people saying, what happened to the palette? Why did BrickLink get rid of all these pieces? When really they didn't get rid of any pieces. You just had this box checked. So for me, who I care a lot more about the sculpting and the shaping than I do which shade of color I use, I usually have that turned off because then I can see all the parts. So now you can find or hide printed parts, adjust the size of the parts in the palette, and use the rest of the palette like a pro. If this was helpful, say thanks with a like, a comment, or subscribing. And be sure to check out more tutorials, including the rest of the Studio Basics playlist right here on my channel. The next one is about how to detect collisions in your model that would make it impossible to build physically. We'll see you there.